back in time when you were 15 years old, and there's probably one thing that you remember about this time period, and it's about the time that you were getting your driver's permit. You can probably remember your parents maybe joking how nervous they are, and that would be completely understandable. But for my family, it was a bit different whenever it was time for me to drive. Around that time that I was 15 years old, my mom, who has multiple sclerosis, really started getting worse and worse from her disease. And multiple sclerosis, simply put, is just a disconnect between some of the neurons stretching from your brain to other parts of your body, oftentimes your lower extremities, affecting your ability to walk. So at about this time, I started transferring responsibility, and one of my biggest responsibilities to take was grocery shopping for my family for each week. And now let me just tell you, at 15, I was not concerned about healthy eating habits. I was really just concerned about the fact that I had my mom's credit card and I could go get whatever I wanted from the store. But over time, as my mom progressively got worse, I really just wanted to do anything that I could to help her feel better. And so, over the years, I started developing those healthy eating habits that I once ignored. And over the time, we started noticing that my mom would feel better. Her symptoms of maybe constipation or headaches, or maybe she would just take one less nap a day, which is huge for someone with MS, where she was getting better just by diet. And this is actually something that I have done research on, and a study has shown that individuals with MS that feel like they eat healthy also tend to report a higher quality of life. But at the time, my mom and I didn't know this, so we went to the internet and looked what kind of diets there were for individuals with MS. And let me just tell you, there were a lot. And none of them follow the same guidelines, and none of them were rigorously backed by research. So we were kind of back to step one. We felt really confused, which is how a lot of individuals with MS feel. One of the top questions asked to the MS Society is about the topic of nutrition. And this is really what fueled my desire to do research, as I saw this disconnect in my mother's life. So at the School of Nursing, Dean Alexis Steichbergen does multiple studies on individuals with MS, focusing on enhancing their health and wellness. One of these studies has been going on for 19 years, and each year they send out a survey of multiple questions that these individuals with MS respond to and send back to us. This year, I got the absolute honor of getting to add a question to the survey, and I simply asked them if they've ever consulted with any of the following individuals about their dietary practices. Now, I felt like this question was so important because it kind of addresses that disconnect. We know from the research that these people are confused about what they should be partaking in their nutrition. And we also know that that nutrition could increase their quality of life. So, aren't these individuals people that could help them? Well, it turned out in our study of over 250 individuals, less than 20% of them had contacted any of these people. Now, these professionals can do things like advise individuals with MS or anybody to avoid certain foods that might cause some symptoms like my mom had of constipation or fatigue. And they can also tell you to add in some foods or supplements that would make you feel better. Ultimately, they're really developing a diet for that person specifically. So with this information, why is over 80% of my sample not seeing these individuals? Now, the people in my sample have an average age of 65 and have at least had MS for the past 19 years. So I just thought that this was really interesting. Now, with this information, I really hope that individuals with MS will ask questions to their doctors or just any professional about what foods they should be avoiding to feel better in the future. If somebody told you that if you avoid a few certain foods a day or maybe added in a couple more that you would report a higher quality of life down the line, wouldn't you want to know which foods to avoid? Well, I also hope that the doctors will really just take the time that sometimes isn't addressed to just make a referral to a dietitian. We know that this is something that concerns individuals with MS, so just a simple referral could go a long way. Now back to my own story with my mother. A lot of it was done through trial and error because I didn't know what I know now. And a lot of simple dietary mistakes could have been avoided if we had just talked to a dietitian or nutritionist. She did end up seeing a nutritionist, and She still has MS because MS doesn't have a cure, but she's living with a higher quality of life than ever before. And this is something that I really hope for any individual with MS to experience. Thank you.
About 2 minutes for questions.
Yes.
Are there any particular do's or don'ts that you want to share with us that you discovered with her? In terms of what she should eat or not eat?
For her, she avoids gluten and dairy products. Gluten sometimes makes you, it causes inflammation throughout the body, in particular hers, and so that can even lead to more fatigue. So that's a big thing that she avoids. But dairy also, individuals with MS sometimes have dysphagia, which is trouble swallowing, and dairy can really make that worse. So she avoids dairy as well. Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you learned about doing survey research as part of this project?
Survey research is really interesting because it's all self-report. So it is kind of perception of how they feel